Shalom, my friends. We were having a number of technical difficulties with this live uh, broadcasting. Probably I'm not the only one who is trying to broadcast live, so I don't know who is going to be watching me in such a late hour, but to send some emails to people with the link. I hope this one is going to be working just fine. And if you are watching me, please indicate in your comments in the chat that you are watching me, and if you happen to have any emails to forward people that they would know the link, please do so. So let me just have just a little minute to get everybody. So I said, so all right. So whoever is able to pick it up on the email, I sent an email to our members from Beit Shalom Balabav. So please send it around, and so people, if they can't watch it now, that they would be watching it later. So today our parasha is called Tisah, and it starts with the book of Exodus, chapter 30, verse 11, and it says here, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when you take census, so when you count, this is what it means, Kitisa. It means when you count. So very important parasha because it has several very serious questions, at least two of them, but I'm not sure if we're going to get all two, but at least one of the questions that is very important. And that question, that issue is found in Exodus chapter 31. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. And so here is the passage which we're going to read, Exodus 31, starting from verse 12. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak also to the children of Israel, saying, surely my Sabbath you shall keep, and for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. The rabbis asked this question, why suddenly in Exodus 31 God repeats this statement about the Sabbath? And one of the challenging issue in this verse is a very, very small Hebrew particle, which New King James Bible translates as surely. I'm just curious what other versions are doing with this. The New International doesn't have this particle. You must observe the Sabbath. Let's see what else can we find. New American Standard Bible. Let's see, what does it say here? Let's go just a second. It says, oh, interesting. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, but as for you, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, you shall you shall surely observe my Sabbaths. It's very interesting that New American Standard Bible actually renders it the way it does, because the word ach, that little particle, is very interesting. If I were to translate literally, let's see if I have a Jewish here. Let's see what it says. Yeah, I expected it from the JPS, the Jewish Publication Society. So, speak to the Israelite people and say, nevertheless, you must keep my Sabbath. Ooh. I think that's the best translation of this particle. And there is a reason why specifically Jewish Publication Society translates this particle this way. Nevertheless, you shall keep my Sabbath. What does nevertheless have to do? Well, this type of statement, even in English, I was going to do my own translation and just said, but you must keep my Sabbath. But I think nevertheless is better in English. If you have any better suggestion on this, or which one is better, nevertheless or but, just type in your comments. When you type your comments, it's very important for me to know that you're listening, so please do so. Otherwise, I don't know who is listening and whether whether you're able to hear me well. So, nevertheless, what does it mean? Nevertheless, it's connecting with something. What is this connecting with? No. Let's read it in a context. The Lord spoke to Moses. See, I have singled out by name Bezalel, the son of Uri of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. I have endowed him with divine spirit, ability, and knowledge in every kind of craft, to make designs for work in gold, silver, and copper, to cut stones for setting, and to carve wood, to work in every kind of craft. Moreover, I have assigned to him Agoliath, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, and I have also granted skill to all who are skillful, that may make everything that I have commanded you: the tent of meeting, the ark of the covenant. The Jewish publication here puts it, the ark of pact, covenant. Anyway, the and the cover upon it, and all furnishing of the tent, the table and its utensils, the pure lampstand, and all its fittings, and the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering and its utensils, and the laver and its stand, and the service vestments, the sacral vestments of Aaron the priest, the vestments of his sons for their service and priest, as well as anointing oil, the aromatic incense for the sanctuary, just as I have commanded to do. As you can see, quite a few people were involved in craft, in serious job, which requires serious skills of craftsmanship to make all these objects of the sanctuary furnishing. And so that is a very serious work which requires to have good hand and good skills. And this work is holy because it is done for construction of the dwelling place of God. So this is how God contrasts it with another important statement. Nevertheless, you must keep my Sabbath. So, very important here. Look at the logic and the structure of this chapter. On the one hand, God is assigning a very serious, important craftsmanship work to do serious jobs of the holy utensils. On the other hand, God says, well, don't forget about Sabbaths. More so, it says here, for it is a sign between me and you throughout the ages, that you may know that I am the Lord. I have consecrated you. Notice this. Consecrated you, which basically means my dwelling is holy, you are holy. But I made you holy, and this is why you abstain from work on Sabbath, no matter how holy it looks like. And then it says, you shall keep the Sabbath, for it is the holy for you. So the holiness of Sabbath overrides the holiness of sanctuary and its subjects. Who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his kin. What does it mean, cut off from among his kin? Well, very simple. You do not belong to Israel anymore if you profane the holy Sabbath. So Sabbath is what defines you as Israelite, as the people of God. That's very important because when we look at the history of how it was in the second century, late first century, early second century, Romans hated Jews because they blamed Jews for instigating the several wars. First Judean War ended up in 70 AD with a terrible tragedy of destruction of the temple. The other Judean War was Bar Kokhba rebellion, another tragedy for Jewish people, 135th AD. So all these wars, um, Romans used a strategy of information war, which we know of it today. Um, and so, what Romans did, they decided to basically ridicule Jews as much as possible. And what did they choose to ridicule Jews for? You know, when we want to ridicule someone, be sarcastic in regard to someone, we choose to derage on the most prominent characteristics. And that is actually the main key, as we know here today in America. The racial derangements are using specifically that, the most prominent characteristic that are applied to the group of people which are defined by society as race. Anyway, I'm not gonna get into that. But this is the idea of you know ridicule, derangement, bigotry. You take the most definite characteristics. So Roman bigotry against the Jews, the very first historical anti-Semitism, goes all the way 1900 years to the end of the first century, beginning of the second century, centered around Shabbat. Because Shabbat, what Romans picked up, was very defining characteristic of a Jew. This is very important, because in today's world, in our country, for bigotry, what do they use? The skin color, the look of the people. But Jews didn't look much different from Romans. What defined them? What distinguished them from Romans? Sabbath. So they started ridiculing Sabbath. In some, like in Midrash, on the book of Lamentation, we have this story of a Roman play in theater. I can imagine they played it in this big theater in Caesarea, where I take my tourist constantly. I hope this pestilence will pass and we will be able to organize some nice group to the Bible land and see this magnificent uh, amphitheater. And so it was these amphitheaters in which Romans played the comedy, and that comedy is recorded in Midrash on the Book of Lamentation, and it says, they take the camel to the stage, and no, this is not a church Christmas play. It was brutal. They put a sackcloth on camel, and they asked the question, why does camel wear a sackcloth? And the answer, well, the camel is in mourning, and this is Jewish camel, and that's why he's in mourning and fasting today, because on Jewish Sabbath, a Jew owner doesn't feed the camel because he is not allowed to work. That's actually not true. But it created a stereotype, and everybody ridiculed. And it was this kind of stereotyping that actually led many Christians in the late second century, Christian leaders, many of whom by that time were not Jewish, actually to start distancing themselves from the Jewish Sabbath, which actually led to the final changes of this during the time of Constantine. And so, since that, uh, the church accepted the Sunday as official day of the Lord. And so, um, even some early Puritans Sabbath the called Sunday as Sabbath. Kind of an interesting twist here, Sabbatarian Puritans. But the roots of it, emerged in the middle second century, and the reason for Christians to have the idea of abandoning the Jewish Sabbath was specifically because Romans ridiculed Jews for Sabbath. But, well, yes, this is the sign. And having said this, let's continue reading. 6 days you may work, 6 days may work be done, but the seventh day shall be Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. Here we repeat several times the key word, work. What does it actually mean? When we look at the Hebrew, we see that English word work translates a Hebrew word malacha. When you look at the Hebrew language, you'll find two words that are translated into English as work, melacha and avodah. So, on the one hand, they're synonymous, but there are differences in them. And it's very interesting. Rabbis clearly understand that on Sabbath, what is forbidden is malacha. Avodah is not forbidden. So it's very important and difficult task that rabbis do in the Mishnah. That's the law code used, which records Pharisaic tradition, which is actually a very important document because I have to speak it on behalf of Jewish community when I see ignorant Christian preachers who are trying to compare the statutes found in the Mishnah with an attempt to be saved by works. That is ignoramus, because Mishnah is not attempting to teach anybody what to do to be saved. What Mishnah is recording, and Talmud is developing this in a commentary on Mishnah, which is, Mishnah and Gemara comprise the Talmud. Gemara is the commentary on Mishnah. Talmud was completed in about 7th century AD. The goal of this document is to actually create some ethical rules. And what is about ethical rules about the Sabbath? Well, there are plenty. And today, Sabbath keeping Christian community faces them. Is it lawful to drive on Sabbath? Well, I had a friend. It wasn't actually me, it was my friend Andrei from the radio, who had a friend who was a Sabbatarian Christian. We call them in Russian Sabbatnik. And so this Sabbatnik and Andrei and a couple other people were in a car on Friday, and they were driving home from somewhere. They needed to get to Portland, but the Sabbath began. As soon as the sun set, this Sabbatnik friend And these Christians, Russian-speaking Christians here, they have several churches in Portland area. He pulled over and he said, "I'm not going anywhere. It's a Sabbath. We'll stay here." It was middle of winter. The wind was blowing, howling. It wasn't safe. So they literally forced him to go, and they got home, yes, after the sunset, Friday evening. He was very, very seriously tormented by his conscience. How come he transgressed the Holy Sabbath? The Lord has his way, because sometimes later his wife had the first baby, and her contractions started on Sabbath. And what was he supposed to do? Tell her, "Honey, you gotta stop." Eh? As you can see, God has his humor over this man, because all three of his children were born on Sabbath. And 3 times he had to take and drive his wife, who was in labor, to, not yet in labor, but just having a contraction, to the maternity ward on Sabbath. And thanks God, there was some medical personnel to take care of the woman. So, as you can see, the issue is complex. What do we do? How do we define what is work on Sabbath? There was a story about a Karaite group became known today in America because of the writing of this interesting fellow by the name Nehemiah Gordon. And I later read that there is this Karaite community in California. They are actually real. And so what we have is some of the Karaite communities, especially in Crimea and in Ukraine, and just for information, Karaite community split off from Judaism in the 9th, 10th century, and they did not accept any rabbinic writing. That's why they said, "We're reading the scripture. We karaim." The opposite side was, the opposing side was rabbanim. So we listen to the rabbis. And so Karaites never listen to anything what rabbis say. And so no work. This is how they understood it. Here was their synagogue. They called it Knesset. And they would meet on Friday before the sundown and had their service. But as soon as the sun goes down, off they go home. Before sun sets, they put themselves in bed and do no work, and they lay in bed for 24 hours until the Sabbath evening sun sets again. Oh, is this the way to go? As you can see, rabbis did not try to do this. They were trying to define what malacha is, and so they would be able to distinguish it between malacha and avodah. Some people think, "Oh, how foolish it is." And I see many Christians, especially Adventists, who are split on this issue. I remember one day in Kiev, a woman came to my wife after my sermon and said, "I don't like how your husband preaches." She said, what do you not like? He doesn't answer specific questions. And what specific question do you have? Well, um, I have my granddaughter's birthday, and it's on Sabbath, which is today. So back in those days, you've got in Kiev what was popular, little makeshift cafes where they had a rotisserie machine, and they would have constantly roasted these rotisserie chicken and sell it hot to the people, and people loved it, that it was fresh and hot and so forth. And she said, my granddaughter loves rotisserie chicken. Am I permitted? Am I not violating the Sabbath if I go to this cafe and buy for my granddaughter as her birthday gift that rotisserie chicken and bring it to the birthday party, which is in a few hours? And he doesn't answer this question. Well, some people laugh about this and say, yeah, but what answer do we have? We struggle. For example, a medical work. Well, as my previous example mentioned, apparently it was nice for this sabbatnik to be actually received with his wife, who was having a contraction, by a qualified personnel who was available to deliver his 3 children on Sabbath. So somebody was working on Sabbath. Well, what does it mean? Are we to say medical work is always exempt? All medical work always exempt? Or maybe some medical work would not be exempt? What's the difference? Can we try to make shifts? I mean, all kinds of questions that are, and if medical work is so important, what other work is important? So that cannot be, there's many questions that people are asking about the Sabbath, which require answer. So rabbis attempted to answer this question, and they define work by previous context. Since the text says, nevertheless keep the Sabbath. Oh, the rabbis thought. Right before this nevertheless, we have a list of all kinds of craft work, that craftsmanship work that had to be done for, cut stones, verse 5, carve wood, make designs in gold, silver, copper, make the utensils, make vestments, make anointing oil. So what did the rabbis do? They basically gave these different jobs specific names and qualified it as the basic work, the basic works that are forbidden on Sabbath. Then they thought, and they said, before I say that, then they counted how many actions or works are listed in chapter 31 of Exodus from 1 to 11. And they figured out that there are 39 basic works that are forbidden, and actually are punishable by death, because it says you do this work, you desecrate Sabbath, you desecrate my holiness, you profane the Sabbath. So it's serious. It's very strict. So these are 39 works. They're basics, and then you have derivatives from this work. In other words, the situations that are analogous, or that derives from this, and they're also forbidden. So these are serious questions. Did rabbis get it right? Oh, it's very difficult to say. I give you another example, which can be found in the book of Exodus, chapter 35, where these two men, Bezalel and his helper, began to work. And people kept bringing all these offerings, the materials that were necessary to complete the work. And so, let me open here, Exodus 25 states, sorry, 25, 35. That's what my Bible is. Exodus. I'm wrong. Exodus 36. That's why I'm not able to find. Exodus 36, verse 6. So, when Exodus 36 says, here, people said to Moses, I read verse 5. The people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that the Lord has commanded to be done. Moses, thereupon, had this proclamation made throughout the camp. Let no man or woman make further effort toward the gifts for the sanctuary, so the people stop bringing. So what sometimes happens, the rabbis take passage like this, the people stop bringing, and they extrapolate it and say, they stopped carrying things out of their house, and bringing is the work on the sanctuary, and they were carrying out things out of their house. So you're not allowed on Sabbath to carry anything out of your house. And so they began to discuss what does it mean, and sometimes bring very, very funny examples what it means to carry things out of the house. For example, if a beggar knocks on your door and he's on the street and he wants you to help him out, of course he's hungry, he wants some bread. So if a beggar protrudes his hand with a basket through the door, and the owner of the house places the bread into the basket, and the owner of the house and the beggar pulls out his hand and takes the basket and walks away, the beggar, the owner of the house is not liable for violating the Sabbath, whereas the beggar does violate because he carried out the thing out of the house. I mean, we can give even more funny example to illustrate how, the idea of transferring objects outside the house on Shabbat. They give this example. If your camel is standing on the common area, which could be a street, and your water trough is inside your courtyard, and the camel wants to drink from the water trough, and he stretches his head and long neck into the water trough and start drinking, but his body and his stomach is on the street, of course, then it's a violation of Sabbath. You're not supposed to do this. Then they give even funnier example, as they say, one is not allowed to urinate on Sabbath from the house into the street, as if not on Sabbath it's allowed to do. But of course, all these examples are exaggeration, they're funny, but they are trying to exemplify the idea that, hey, it's forbidden to transfer anything on Sabbath. Well, I have to say, this is the exegesis of the passage which they use to have us as a starting point to prove that this is forbidden. Well, exegesis, how do I say, a bit faulty. I don't think that this text ever intends to speak about Sabbath prohibition of carrying objects, transferring objects from the house into the common area. But these insights are important for us to understand how rabbis are thinking, what's in the legal thinking, ethical thinking of the rabbis, and how do they do this. And unfortunately, sometimes I know some preachers who ridicule this, but I wouldn't be ridiculing this. I would try to understand the rationale. And the rationale here is to develop the ethical rules, because we can ridicule and say, oh, we don't need a list of things that are forbidden on Sabbath. And oh, how Jews are foolish, they made this list. Yeah, but what do you have? There is a lack of ethical consistency among the Christians. And Jews, the rabbis, are very consistent ethically. This may not be biblical, but this is an example of ethical consistency. What I can see biblical is actually their way of, instead of Karaites just saying, oh, let's just lie down on a bed and that's it, and that will be how we will have you do no work. But they're trying to grapple with the question, what is actually possible to do and what is not. I mean, how do we distinguish the Sabbath? Just coming to church? It's very interesting. Christianity is exactly like that. Many preachers today preach about Sabbath. Of course, they understand Sunday as a Sabbath, because in English, Sabbath, primary meaning of the word Sabbath is rest. And that's why I know how Adventist evangelists always emphasize the seventh day is the Sabbath. which sometimes didn't work in Russia very well. They didn't understand what the issue. That's the peculiarity of English language, but in Christian lingo, Sabbath always meant the day of rest. So that's why very often you see these big churches actually promoting 10 commandments, but they just say, remember the day of rest to keep it holy. There are some churches that say it doesn't matter which day is the day of rest, as long as you have the day of rest and follow the cycle. But on the other hand, Sabbath is very, very difficult day for some people. I mean, Sabbath, the Christian Sabbath, which is Sunday. I remember driving through Wisconsin from Minnesota, and I wanted to eat, and it was Sunday, and I pulled over in Madison looking for some buffet. I was bitterly disappointed to have discovered that the lines were long. It dawned on me that I pulled over into the exit in the wrong area, which was very densely populated by churches. And all these churches just at 12 o'clock finish their service, and all their members are going to have fun. And where do they go? Golden Corral, Chinese buffet, old country buffet. Folks love it. And that's how they spend their Sabbath. What are we going to do? You know, on the contrast to that, in history of Protestantism, we have this phenomenon in England, which are Sabbatarian Puritans. And Sabbatarian Puritans, they were teaching about the holiness of Sabbath. And so they were teaching that you must not do any work on Sabbath, not just go to church on Sabbath and then do whatever you want, but keep it holy. Oh, there was only one problem with these Sabbatarian Puritans. When by Sabbath, they meant first day of the week. So this is the tension I hear in Christendom today, in Sunday Christendom, where one part of churches are very lax, and you go on Sunday to mall, you go to the buffet, you go out to eat, you do whatever you want after the service. And the other, oh, but this is the Holy Sabbath. And there's this tension, but it's all about Sunday. But this is a very interesting example to us, those who keep the Sabbath, starting with Adventists, ending with different Messianic groups that proclaim the faithfulness to Jewish Shabbat and other Christian groups. What are we to do? Where is our role? Well, while the idea of transferring the object doesn't seem to be biblical, the idea of dividing between avodah and malacha is vitally important. How do rabbis actually answer the question about the medical work? If you go Google even simple sites, Judaism Ask the Rabbi, there will be question, is it possible for, is working in medical field violate Sabbath? Well, and here we're not talking about the ordinary opening of the family practice office. We're talking the hospital. And yes, in in the heart of Brooklyn, we have Maimonides Hospital, where on Sabbath you will see different Jewish employees with kippahs and payot and all of this. You see, they're Orthodox Jews, and they're working. No, they're not. You're confused. Let me unconfuse you. Uh, when you read the word malacha, that's what's forbidden on Sabbath. When you ask rabbis about the hospital work, he will answer hospital work is not qualified as malacha. So what is it? It's avodah. What's the difference? Well, if you look at the synonyms, any synonym, you'll find that he used them a little different, but they kind of overlap and they differ. So, in which way malacha and avodah differ? Malacha is what God stopped when he finished creation. So, malacha is a creative work that leads to having something made. That's why cooking, for example, it's malacha. And I know quite a few Adventists who intensively cook on Sabbath. So, what's the alternative? What's the other side? Avodah. Avodah is actually a work, but can also be translated as service. And so, in this particular case, it's important. When we want to know how to say in Hebrew divine service, very simple. Avodah kedusha, holy work. Well, so some of the things we do is called service, and some of the things we do is called creative work. Creative work needs to be stopped. Service is a service. How do we differentiate? What's the principle? Well, rabbis may be somewhat right by creating these derivatives and saying, hey, this is what they were doing, craftsman work, and they stopped. So they were trying to extrapolate. Was the list comprehensive? Probably not. But the principle that is built on the precedent, it's actually a good legal work. American legal system is based on precedents. So I think the ethics of the rabbis make sense. Is transferring the objects forbidden? Carrying something in your hand, driving the car? Well, I'll be able to speak on this when we get to the statement, "Thou shalt not not light the fire on the Sabbath day," and we will talk about what does it mean biblically and how the rabbis approach this. But of course, we learned in this parasha that transferring objects from the house into the street is quite a stretch. Try to see that it's based on Exodus 36. So we need to be biblical, but I think there's a great idea. When we ask ourselves a question, ask God a question, what is right? Is this malacha or avodah? If it's malacha, a work, creative work, you may do it. I mean, it's forbidden. But if it's a service, the commandment does not prohibit the service, especially which is necessary. So we have to be prudent. We have to be wise. Several years ago, we attended one church where a pastor gave a fiery speech on how he was a victim of his parents' legalism, who forbade him on Sabbath to go swim in the ocean and do fun stuff. Unfortunately, I see a trend here that there are many younger preachers who constantly, and so forth. So, yeah, some people can be legalistic. It's funny how different culture is actually different on this. For example, in Transcarpathian area, if brethren in the church would see me clean shaven, they would not allow me to preach. They would see me as a big sinner and violator on Sabbath because I shaved. Well, in Moldova, parents would not allow children to grab and eat something from the tree or a bush. Like if you have a raspberry bush and you have a beautiful raspberry hanging looking at you, and you come home from the church and you try to grab this raspberry and sample it. No, this is Sabbath. You're not allowed. This is a harvest. I remember the story of Jesus and his disciples plucking the ears of wheat on Sabbath day, and all this discussion which he had. But this is to say, different communities have different perceptions on what's forbidden on Sabbath. But going back to this pastor who was complaining about his parents, he said, oh, we need to do good things. We need to do service to on Sabbath day. So it was fine. I would agree with that. But then he said, well, in order to demonstrate to the world that we're not legalists, next Sabbath, come in your work clothes and with your tools. We have one old lady who needs some help with her backyard. So we'll go clean the backyard and prove all the world that we Adventists are not legalistic. When I asked this pastor, why can't we do this on Sunday? Of course, it didn't fit his agenda. He brushed me off and said, we are to preach the world that we're doing good on Sabbath. Well, I don't think this is the right attitude to do to the ethics of the Torah. But unfortunately, many Christians are often pulled in different directions by these political agenda rather than the desire to do right in the eyes of the Lord. But we should not go to the other extreme. And another story about one person who preached from the pulpit said that he suffers from the guilty conscience for many years. It was Sabbath. It was very rainy day in his subdivision, and he basically was kind of watching something 3 a.m. whatever, and then he saw a moving truck pulling to his subdivision, and uh, it was his new neighbors, and it was rainy, and they had to, to get to their house, they had to traverse a very unpleasant slope full of clay. So they started to open up the U-Haul truck and pull out some piece of furniture, and they were struggling to get it up. And they knocked on his door, and they asked him if he could help, and he said, "No, it's a Sabbath, I can't help." Well, he feels now this was very cruel and brutal. But you see, this is the problem. We here are tend to think in extreme. Oh, I want to be faithful to Sabbath. I'm not going to help this guy who is struggling here because, I'll violate the Sabbath. Maybe it wasn't the best decision. But going the opposite direction and cleaning the backyard of the old lady on Sabbath to prove the point that you are now doing the Lord's work and good work and so forth and so forth. That's a question. That's a hard one, and this is showing that Christian community, Adventists including, is very mature in its historical experience in dealing with Sabbath questions. And it's not right to ridicule Jews for what they were trying to resolve, successfully or not, but maybe better learn, because we are going to be facing these decisions weekly on Sabbath. So may the Lord help us to do the right decision and follow the ways of the Torah and be a good neighbor and a believer, an example to others. Our Father, our King, be our guide here, and may we understand your will for us in following the precepts of your Torah. I pray in your blessed holy name. Amen. Well, my dear, I hope those of you who were watching were able to watch this live. I hope finally I see some emails coming that it's actually people are able to see it, and I hope it will be finally able to save on the channel so that others who did not have opportunity would be able to see it. But I wish you a blessed week, and may the Lord guard us from all these pestilence that is now going around, and may we come out on the other hand safe and sound. Blessings to you, and have a good one.